From the moment you took your first breath, an invisible cord was tied around you, not out of pure love, but out of a deeper hunger, the need to be admired, obeyed, and never challenged. You didn't grow up in the arms of a mother who truly saw you. You grew up before a mirror reflecting only her own image. Each time you began to shine, she carefully dimmed your light, just enough to remind you that your brightness belonged to her. At first, it all looked like love. She hugged you when others were watching, praised you when you played the role of the good child. But a narcissistic mother's love is never unconditional. It's always an exchange. You quickly learned that affection always came with a price: obedience, silence, and the loss of your own self. You weren't allowed to be who you were. You were only allowed to be the version of you she could brag about to others. Those memories still echo inside you. When you were happy, she grew jealous. When you were sad, she became angry. When you succeeded, she found a way to make it her story. And then came the familiar phrases, repeated like incantations. "You're too sensitive. Don't embarrass me. I sacrificed my whole life for you." Each sentence was a tiny thread wrapping around your heart, tightening over the years until you could no longer tell where her voice ended and yours began. That's how control begins. Not through violence, but through emotional chaos. She made you believe that love could vanish at any moment. The one mistake could make her withdraw it. You learned to predict her moods, to please, to appease, to avoid her anger. You became a watchful child, living in constant tension, convinced that if you could just be better, quieter, more perfect, maybe one day she would truly love you. But that day never came, because what she sought was not love, it was power. And she found that power by turning your natural empathy into her weapon. She made you believe you were responsible for her emotions, that when she was sad, it was your fault. When she was angry, you weren't good enough. When she was lonely, you didn't love her enough. You grew up as her emotional regulator, until her moods became the weather of your life, sunshine or storm, all depending on her. That is emotional slavery disguised as love. And even now, as an adult, that cord still pulls you back in every pang of guilt, every fear of rejection, every hesitation to set a boundary. You still hear her voice inside whenever you try to live your truth. You're selfish. You owe me. No one will ever love you like I do. But there is one truth she never wanted you to see. You were never born to carry her emotions. You were never meant to heal the wounds she refused to face. You are not her extension. You are a complete, independent soul. And the first step to freedom is seeing those invisible threads. Because only when you dare to see them can you begin to cut them, one by one, until you can finally breathe, not as someone's possession, but as your true self. A mother's love is meant to be a place of comfort, but with a narcissistic mother, it becomes the most sophisticated trap. She doesn't need to yell or threaten. All she has to do is make you believe that you owe her everything, your breath, your dreams, even your smallest moments of joy. She'll say, "I did everything for you," and it's hard to argue with that, because yes, she did give you everything, but not to set you free, rather to make you dependent. Every gift carries a debt. Every compliment hides an invisible chain. You grow up feeling both grateful and terrified, loving her yet trembling, because one hint of defiance could make that love vanish in an instant. You learn to live carefully to avoid hurting her. You don't dare to speak your truth, to choose differently, or to leave. When she cries, you feel cruel. When she's angry, you feel wrong. When she's lonely, you feel responsible. And slowly you forget that you too are a human being with your own feelings. In your heart, her voice becomes the law. If you make me sad, it means you don't love me. The guilt trap doesn't work through violence, it works through seepage. It seeps into dinner conversations, phone calls, and those "I'm saying this for your own good" lectures that are really about maintaining power. The narcissistic mother knows you have a soft heart, that you care deeply, that you empathize, and she exploits the most beautiful part of you to keep control. She makes you believe that love means enduring, that devotion means sacrifice, and that rebellion is sin. But real love never grows from guilt. It doesn't require you to shrink so someone else can feel grand, or to exhaust yourself to prove loyalty. True love lets you be yourself. It lets you breathe. It lets you say no without fear of being abandoned. One day you'll realize that you can't save this mother, because she never wanted to be saved. She only wanted to keep you in the role of the guilty child, and the moment you can look her in the eye, through her tears and accusations, and calmly say, "I love you, but I can't live your life for you," that is the moment you break the trap. No child is born to carry their mother's loneliness. No one is meant to live as someone else's replica. When you dare to step out of that spiral of guilt, you are not betraying your mother, you are simply restoring love to its true meaning, freedom without conditions and without chains. Since childhood, you were taught to read your mother's emotions long before you ever learned to understand your own. A single glance, a sigh, or a subtle silence from her was enough to make you shrink, grow alert, and search for a way to make her happy again. You believed that was love, that caring meant anticipating her moods. But in truth, it was an invisible game, one where she was the puppeteer and you were the mirror reflecting her feelings. In that game, you weren't allowed to have emotions of your own. If she was happy, you had to smile. If she was sad, you had to grow quiet. Throughout your childhood, you became an emotional weather forecaster, scanning every shift in the atmosphere, bracing for the next storm. You lost touch with your own feelings because they were constantly overridden. Even joy became dangerous. Sadness had to be hidden because everything you felt could be twisted into an insult, a lack of love, or disrespect. A narcissistic mother doesn't see you as a person, she sees you as a reflection of herself. She doesn't ask, "How do you feel?" She asks, "Why did you make me upset?" Each question like that was another pair of scissors, cutting away pieces of your inner world. You slowly learned that your true emotions were unsafe, that self-expression led to punishment, and that the only way to survive was to become the pleaser, the one who maintains peace at all costs. But the price of being a pleaser is your soul, because when you constantly adjust yourself to match her moods, you lose the ability to tell where you end and she begins. Years later, even as an adult, you still react to the world as though you're living with her shadow beside you. You feel guilty when someone's unhappy. You apologize when others are angry. You fear disappointing people even when you've done nothing wrong. That is the residue of emotional enmeshment, the state of living as a mirror that no longer reflects its own image. Escaping the mirror game is not easy, because it means facing a painful truth. All this time, you've never truly lived for yourself. But the healing begins the moment you stop and ask, is this feeling really mine? When you're sad, allow yourself to be sad. When you're angry, allow yourself to be angry. Don't fear those emotions. They're the first fragments of your authentic self, the one you lost long ago. A narcissistic mother can only control you as long as you keep reflecting her back. But when you stand still, no longer reacting, no longer mirroring, she panics because suddenly she's forced to face her own emptiness. And that's when her power dissolves. You are no longer a mirror. You are a human being with your own feelings, your own soul, your own right to exist outside anyone else's emotional storm. And when you dare to live in alignment with your true emotions, you don't just break free from the mirror game. You reclaim the inner light she once tried to dim. Some people left their childhood home long ago, yet that home never truly left them. You might live in another city, another country, even have a career and a life of your own. But the moment you make a mistake or feel a little weak, that voice returns inside your head, her voice. It doesn't have to shout to have power. It whispers with the same familiar authority, "You'll never be good enough. People will laugh at you. Without me, you'd be nothing." At first, you think it's just memory, but over time, you realize it lives within you, like an invisible warden guarding the walls of your mind, watching every thought, judging every feeling, choking every dream. You may have left her physically, but in your psyche, she still sits on the throne, holding the keys that decide how you think, how you feel, and how you see yourself. A narcissistic mother doesn't need to be near you to keep control. All she has to do is plant the seed of fear and let you water it with self-blame. That voice becomes an inner law, making you limit yourself before anyone else ever could. You start living in self-surveillance mode, afraid to fail, afraid to express, afraid to believe you deserve love. Every time you feel happy, you doubt it. Every time you succeed, you dismiss it as luck. And when someone loves you genuinely, a part of you trembles, afraid they'll soon see the unworthy person your mother said you were. That's how a narcissistic mother turns her fears into your belief system. She doesn't just claim your childhood, she invades your inner language. Even as an adult, you continue to speak to yourself with her tone, her judgment, her shame. And the cruelest part is that you mistake it for rational thinking. Breaking free from that voice doesn't mean silencing it. The harder you try to mute it, the louder it becomes. The only way out is to change the speaker. Each time that voice says you'll never be good enough, respond, "No, I'm learning, I'm growing." When it whispers, "No one will ever love you," say, "That's okay, I'm learning to love myself." Gradually, a new voice begins to rise within you, your own voice, warmer, truer, and infinitely kinder. True freedom doesn't come from cutting contact. It comes from reclaiming your right to define yourself. When you find the courage to stop living by the echoes of the past, you begin rewriting the sentences she carved into your mind. Not with hatred, but with understanding. You were hurt, and you hurt me. But I'm no longer the child who needs your approval. And in that moment, when you listen closely and realize the voice in your mind is finally your own, you'll understand that silence is no longer fear, it is freedom. From childhood, you were taught that being a good child means being grateful, dutiful, and self-sacrificing. But to a narcissistic mother, these virtues stop being moral values. They become weapons, used to bind you with the illusion of duty. She doesn't need to command you, she only needs to look at you with sad eyes, sigh, and whisper, "You're all I have." Just one simple sentence, and suddenly you forget your own limits, willing to do anything just to avoid feeling guilty. Gradually, you begin living as though you owe her your entire life. You don't dare to go far, to say no, or to be happy without her approval. Every joy is measured against her mood. If she isn't happy, neither are you allowed to be. She makes you believe that love must cost you something, that being a good child means killing your dreams, silencing your desires, and living to fulfill hers. You become the perfect child in everyone's eyes, while inside you are quietly dying. A narcissistic mother is clever. She rarely says, "Don't go." Instead, she murmurs, "If you leave, I'll be so lonely," or "Without you, how will I live?" Hidden in those words is a command: stay and keep serving her emotions. And if one day you dare to choose your own path, she becomes the victim. The poor, abandoned mother, betrayed by her ungrateful child. It's that victim role that keeps you trapped. You fear being the bad one. You fear judgment. You fear the accusations. What kind of child does that? Or where is your filial piety? But the truth is, filial duty does not mean imprisoning yourself in your mother's cage. It does not mean erasing yourself to protect someone who refuses to heal. Because real love, even between mother and child, allows both to grow, to fail, to differ, and to live their own lives. You are not betraying your mother by choosing your own path. You're ending a toxic cycle where love became control. And when you can finally say, "I love you, but I must live my own life," you're returning to her the responsibility for her own emotions. Something she made you carry for far too long. Liberation isn't about turning your back, It's about giving each person back what belongs to them. She has the right to live her story, and you have the right to write yours. True devotion isn't about pleasing your mother. It's about daring to live truthfully without letting love become a shackle. Because only when you are free can love return to its real meaning, not as duty, but as a bond freely chosen, gentle, and one where no one must bow to the other. There comes a quiet but thunderous moment in the journey of every child who has lived under a narcissistic mother, the moment when all the pieces finally start to fit. You look back on the years gone by, the words, the anger, the tears, and suddenly you see what you once could not. None of it was random. It was a cycle, a repeating loop of affection, harm, guilt, and control. You begin to notice that every time she praised you, there was always a condition attached. Every time she went silent, it wasn't sadness, it was punishment. Every time she appeared weak, it wasn't to be loved, it was to pull you back in. And when you step back, she smiles. When you rise up, she cries. When you leave, she tells everyone you're ungrateful. Everything follows a design, an emotional theater where you've been trapped in the role of caretaker and scapegoat. Awakening doesn't bring peace at first. It feels like a chill running down your spine when you realize you were never truly loved, only used. The pain isn't just from her manipulation, but from the fact that you once believed it was love. You thought that if you tried harder, waited longer, loved deeper, she would change. But the truth is, every act of love you gave became another lever for her control. When this realization comes, the first reaction is often rage. Rage at yourself for being naive. Rage at her for stealing your childhood, your confidence, and your trust in others. But beneath that anger comes something else. Clarity. You begin to see everything as an observer rather than a participant. She speaks, you stay silent. She cries, you no longer panic. She attacks, you don't react. And in that moment, her power begins to crumble. Because a narcissistic mother cannot exist without your reaction. Her strength doesn't come from what she does, it comes from what she makes you do. Every time you justify, explain, or apologize, you hand her a piece of your energy. But when you stop reacting, you reclaim that energy. You no longer need to prove yourself right or worthy of love. You simply stand still, calm, and let the truth reveal itself. That is the stage of true awakening, when you realize you don't need to defeat her, or get revenge, or seek validation. You only need to reclaim your inner peace. Your silence is no longer submission, it's quiet power. Because when you become silent, she no longer knows how to exist in your story. And when there is no one left to mirror her inflated self, the narcissistic mother is forced to face what she has always run from, herself. That is when you become truly free. Not because she has changed, but because you have stopped orbiting her universe. Awakening isn't the end of the relationship, it's the beginning of self-sovereignty. From the moment you realize you no longer need to react, you have already won. After awakening, what comes first is not relief, but a deep, unnameable sorrow, a sadness that feels ancient. Because you haven't just lost a mother, you've lost the illusion that you ever truly had one. You realize that the woman you called mother never really saw you, never loved you for who you were, but only for how well you reflected her, obeyed her, and made her feel powerful. And so begins an invisible funeral, mourning your childhood, your trust, and the version of yourself that once believed love alone could make everything right. This is the stage of grieving, of facing the emptiness. You cry not only for what happened, but for what never existed. The safe embrace, the unconditional praise, the understanding you always longed for. It is a grief that must be acknowledged, not to blame, but to release. Because only when you accept that the ideal mother never truly existed can your heart finally let go of waiting for something that will never come. From that loss, boundaries are born. No longer blurred lines between love and fear, between respect and submission, between duty and emotional servitude. Now you know that kindness does not mean endurance, and love does not mean allowing harm. You begin to learn how to say no without apologizing, how to walk away without explaining, and how to stay silent, not from fear, but from a choice to protect your peace. Rebirth doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes in quiet, powerful moments. When you look in the mirror and your reflection no longer trembles at the sound of her voice. When you laugh without guilt. When you feel calm instead of vengeful, peaceful instead of needing to prove anything. That's when you realize true power lies not in changing others, but in no longer letting them define you. In that stillness, the inner child, the one who once cowered in fear, finally lifts their head. They look at you and for the first time see an adult strong enough to protect them, gentle enough to love them unconditionally. You become the healthy mother you never had, and in doing so, you end the painful cycle that has passed through generations. Because breaking the cycle isn't just an act, it's a sacred vow to your own soul. The pain ends with me. You are no longer the victim. You are the one chosen to stop, to heal, and to restore the true meaning of love. One quiet morning, you'll notice something miraculous. Her voice no longer echoes in your mind. What remains is your own voice, clear, warm, and steady. You smile, not because you've won against anyone, but because, at last, you have come home. Home to yourself.